3 spine-chilling true Halloween horrors. Discover the sinister and cursed secrets uncovered. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maplewood began to pulse with an unsettling energy. Children yelled with excitement, their laughter echoing like sinister whispers in the October night. But amid the colorful decorations and grinning jack-o'-lanterns, a palpable dread lingered in the air, thick like the fog that crept across the street. Veteran teacher Stephanie, a 38-year-old single mom, stood at her doorstep, nervous energy spilling over as she prepared for her daughter's costume party. Yet, deep down, a gnawing feeling told her something was terribly wrong. Moments ago, she'd caught sight of shadows flitting just out of the reach of the porch light, figures masked by old family photos, their eyes locked onto her with an intensity that chilled her to the bones. The fleeting images stirred painful memories, tales of Maplewood's founding families and the dark rituals whispered about in corner cafes, traditions no one spoke of anymore, much less during Halloween. There was something hidden beneath the surface, clawing to be unmasked this year, and Stephanie could feel it in her gut. The streets filled with pastel candy bags and squeals of delight, but the laughter felt oddly hollow. The neighbors she passed wore forced smiles, their eyes flickering with fear, darting nervously as if anticipating something terrible. The comforting sounds of clinking candy and squeaking costumes curdled into an unsettling unease, a disquiet creeping like vines around her heart. She exchanged short hellos with those she barely recognized, each one a mask hiding a fear deeper than she could comprehend. Just as she thought of retreating indoors, her phone buzzed, another message from an unknown number. "I see you, Stephanie. I know your secrets." Her heart raced. She swiped to read more, but the next lines vanished, cryptic shrouds that sent shivers down her spine. Panic surged as she tried to dismiss the feeling of being watched, attributing it to her worries about motherhood and a party her daughter had rushed off to. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as darkness fell, the festive atmosphere turned rotten. The laughter had dulled, the children scattered, and shadows stretched dangerously across the lawn. Trembling, her instinct screamed for her to go back inside, to barricade the door. Yet she was drawn into the streets, where she noticed twisted figures creeping around the corner. The figures seemed familiar. Faces that should have been friendly became nightmarish, and then came the truth. The adults, those she had once considered friends, stood encircled in eerie silence, murmuring incantations under their breath. Emergency lights flickered in the distance, illuminating the forbidden gathering, an ancient ritual unfolding beneath the stars. A horrifying reality settled in her stomach, twisting harder with each beat of her heart. A storm of dread pushed her to run. She had to find her daughter. The road ahead loomed like a gaping maw, and something dark stirred within. Just when she thought she might break free, a figure emerged from the shadows, planting dread in her soul. Was she truly escaping, or walking right into the web of doom? In Maplewood, even the ghosts of Halloween can wear a deceptively inviting smile. Racing down the street, Stephanie felt breathless. Her lungs burned as she struggled to swallow the panic rising in her throat. Darkness wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket, and every flicker of light sent her heart into a frenzy. She couldn't stop now. She had to find Emma. Her daughter's laughter, usually a beacon, was now lost to the unsettling sounds of the night. The cheerful screams of children had faded, replaced by whispers that twined through the trees like spine-chilling tendrils. Was that her imagination? Or were the very shadows around her exuding a sinister life of their own? Suddenly, she spotted a familiar figure sitting on the porch of a neighbor's house, an elderly woman dressed as a witch, her crooked finger beckoning. The worn face twisted into a knowing grin. "Dear, come closer," she croaked. Stephanie shuddered, unease prickling at her fingertips. No way would she fall for that. Witches were supposed to be in fairy tales, not hiding in the familiar suburbs of Maplewood. "No!" she shouted, and surged forward, her heart pounding with determination. But as she turned, she felt something watching her, an unseen force closing in, the shadows around her shifting, waiting to pounce. Just then, a shrill scream sliced through the air. It came from the nearby park, where whispers danced among the trees. The once familiar playground looked twisted, its swings swaying gently with no wind to push them. "Emma!" Stephanie yelled, her voice raw and desperate. She stumbled toward the sound, feet heavy with dread. As she reached the park, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thick, tinged with decay, and the moon peered down through a veil of clouds, casting ghostly beams on the asphalt. The playground was empty, but echoes of laughter reverberated around her. It felt like a trap. Grappling with her racing thoughts, she fought against the rising fear. She needed to be rational, to think clearly. "Focus, Stephanie," she chastised herself. "Emma is here." But then she heard it. The sound of chanting, low and resonant, rising from the depths of the woods beyond the playground. The hair on the back of her neck stood at attention. This was it. The ritual. The thing lurking behind the mask of normalcy in Maplewood. Her worst fears crystallized into a horrifying truth. This gathering was not just a late-night Halloween party. With steely resolve, Stephanie edged toward the ominous cacophony, her body trembling. The chanting spiraled around her, the words alien and dark. They ignited something primal in her gut. She felt the pull of the fallen leaves beneath her feet, the earth seeming to breathe, and the will of those chanting bled into her very bones. It was intoxicating. Caught between terror and a sickly intrigue, she crept closer, desperately searching for her daughter. As she neared the clearing, excitement bubbled within her, unexpected yet undeniable. A flicker of shadowy movement caught her eye. Was it Emma? "Mom!" The voice, distant yet profoundly clear, spilled forth from the darkness. But as Stephanie's heart surged with hope, it wavered into alarm. The shadows twisted and contorted, revealing a figure that wasn't Emma at all. A smirk spread across its features. "Welcome to the gathering, Stephanie." Chills ravaged her spine, and she instinctively stepped back, panic swelling again. What was this thing? Why was Emma trapped in this web of horrors? The figure advanced, and just as Stephanie thought to scramble back, it grinned wider. "But you don't know what you're truly a part of. It's already begun." A cold dread filled her as she realized the very essence of Halloween had awakened something eternal in Maplewood, and she was right in the middle of it. What had she stumbled into? And would she find Emma before it was too late? The figure loomed closer, its grin stretching unnaturally wide, shadows spilling like ink around its feet. Stephanie's breath lodged in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape the dark embrace of whatever lurked beneath that smirk. But other parts of her, darker, hungrier parts, gripped her feet to the earth, insisting she stand her ground. "Where's Emma?" she demanded, her voice a thin thread of defiance that barely broke the hush of the surrounding shadows. The figure's laughter echoed, a sound both delightfully cruel and chillingly familiar. "She is part of the celebration now, just like you," it crooned, its voice slithering into her ears and wrapping around her mind. Fear crashed over her like a wave, cold and stinging, awakening a primal sense of dread. What celebration? What had it done to Emma? The chanting grew louder, throbbing through the ground and resonating in her bones. Stephanie spun toward the sound, her heart racing. She had to find Emma. She had to break this ghastly hold upon her mind. The figure swayed, tapping its chin knowingly, almost as if relishing her despair. "Join us. It's quite beautiful. You would enjoy it, I promise," it taunted, and for a fleeting moment the dark promise enticed her, a whisper of belonging in a darkened world. "No!" she snapped, shaking her head violently, forcing herself to turn her back on the creature, scrambling toward the shadows of the woods. With each step deeper into those trees, the air tightened around her, thick with a damp chill and a sense of impending doom. "Come and play," the voice echoed behind her. "Join the witches, the real ones." The trees seemed alive, shuddering with a life of their own. Winds whipped around her, tugging at her hair, at her clothes, as if trying to keep her from fleeing. The smell of earth turned sour, mixing with something sweet and decaying, making her stomach twist. Was something out there waiting for her? Would it welcome her, or would she become just another shadow? She pushed on, heart pounding wildly in her chest, ignoring the terror that screamed for her to go back. She had to reach that clearing. She needed to see what they planned for Emma. The chanting continued, a dark melody pulling at her thoughts, weaving anxiety into her mind. Suddenly, she spotted flickering lights beyond the trees. Desperate hope pierced through her fear. Maybe that was where Emma was. "Emma!" she called, voice cracking as she stumbled into a clearing engulfed in darkness. But instead of the expected sight of her daughter, there stood a circle of figures clad in black robes, faces hidden beneath hoods that danced like shadows. They swayed slowly, their chant harmonizing into a single, pulsing rhythm. In the center, a dark altar glimmered with strange symbols, shadows clinging to it like snakes. The air crackled. A chill ran down her spine as she saw something squirming on that altar. An offering? Her heart sank as she stepped closer. In the dim light, she recognized the white dress, Emma's dress. Horror surged through Stephanie, blinding and overwhelming. "Emma!" she screamed again, tearing toward the altar, needing to pull her daughter from this nightmare. But the robed figures turned as one, their eyes glimmering with an otherworldly light, voices rising, drowning out her cries. The leader stepped forward, revealing a face twisted in delight. "You are too late! The hour approaches, and tonight every soul belonging to Maplewood shall be reborn." Panic surged anew. The darkness encroached, suffocating, as despair threatened to swallow her whole. She felt the shadows reaching for her, grasping her limbs, pulling her back from Emma. But as she fought against the grip, one thought blared in her mind. She would not let them take her daughter. With one last, desperate, frantic pull, she tore free. "I won't let this happen!" The words exploded from her lips, battling against the chant. As she leapt toward the altar, something deep inside her surged, an instinct to protect. And in that moment of chaos, the sky above cracked with a deafening thunder, illuminating the dark gathering in a burst of blinding light. An ancient power stirred, and silence fell upon the gathering as the veil between their world and hers began to tear. What force had she unleashed? Would it save them, or would this be the end? The air pulsed with energy, stabbing through the silence that followed the lightning strike. The robed figures shrank back, their chanting faltering into dark gasps of confusion. Shadows slithered, twisting at the edges of the clearing as if afraid of the light. Stephanie stood at the precipice of fear and resolve, her heart thundering in time with the crackle of power that surged around her. She felt a warmth pulse in her chest, a burning light igniting against the shadows clenching around her. What had she called forth? With every step she took toward the altar, the symbols etched into its surface shimmered, reacting to her presence. The chanting transformed, merging into dissonant whispers that flooded her mind with fractured memories of Emma, of laughter, of love that suddenly felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. "Stop! Don't you touch her!" she shouted, the words breaking free as she reached for Emma's dress. But as her fingers grazed the fabric, an icy grip seized her wrist. One of the robed figures, eyes flaming with outrage, loomed closer. "You dare defy us?" it hissed, voice dripping with malice. The others began to chant again, more fervently this time, their words twisting into a horrible crescendo. They raised their arms, summoning the threads of darkness that clawed at Stephanie, trying to draw her into their web. But the pulsating energy within her flared, a beacon against the encroaching chaos. She could feel her instincts sharpen, fight or flight instinct roaring to life. She pulled against the figure's grip, adrenaline surging as she shouted, "I won't leave without her!" As she yanked free, the energy crackled in response, shooting a shockwave outward. The force knocked the nearest witches to the ground, their robes fluttering like blackened wings in the gale. In the midst of the chaos, a flicker of movement drew her gaze back to the altar. Emma's dress seemed to pulse, not just with the uncertainty of fate, but with a whisper of life. Beneath it, she could see shadows shifting, something struggling against bonds unseen. Emma! The name tore from Stephanie's throat, raw and desperate. At that moment, everything changed in a blinding flash. A rush of wind swept through the clearing, the chaotic chants morphing into a symphony of screams. The figures writhed and shrieked, caught in a surreal tide of their own dark magic turning against them. "Flee! We must leave!" one of the witches cried, panic spilling from her lips. The others hesitated, glancing at the unraveling tapestry of their dark intentions. Stephanie seized the moment. She lunged forward, pushing against the collapsing shadows. She had to get to Emma. With every ounce of strength, she tore apart the air between her and her daughter. The energy expanded, warping the night itself as reality frayed. As she neared the altar, an eerie silence fell. Every set of eyes, hers and their twisted gaze, locked onto the altar. And in that heartbeat of a moment, every soul in the clearing held their breath, waiting for the climax of tension to explode. Suddenly, the remnants of the voices echoed one last time. "You have awakened something ancient. No one is safe now." The ground trembled beneath her feet, the darkness swirling violently as the fabric of their world began to unravel. What had she unleashed? As she reached for her daughter, hope battling against despair, she felt the ground of choice break beneath her. Could she pull Emma back into life, or were they both bound to be lost within the shadows? Amidst the swirling chaos, a figure emerged, cloaked in light and shadow, glowing with a power both terrifying and transformative. It stood between them and the altar, filling the air with an undeniable command that sent shivers down Stephanie's spine. What was this being, and what would it decide to do next? The figure pulsated with energy, a distorted silhouette against the fading daylight. In a heartbeat, it stepped forward, a mix of brightness and darkness weaving through its form. The witches drew back, their power waning, fear clawing at their faces as they realized something beyond their comprehension had appeared. Stephanie felt her breath hitch. She stared, her heart racing. What was this being? It seemed to embody both hope and terror. Light flickered within it, mingling with an encroaching darkness that made her skin crawl. The air thickened, buzzing like an electric current, as if the entire world held its breath. "Release her," the figure commanded, its voice a melody of whispers and roars. The sound resonated deep within her, urging her to take action, to fight for Emma despite the heaviness settling around them. The robed figures exchanged frightened glances. Their chants faltered, and one of the witches, once so assertive, stumbled backward. It cannot be!" she shrieked, panic flooding her voice. "Do you think your darkness can hold against the light?" The figure boomed, the ground vibrating with each word. Its luminous energy surged, wrapping around Stephanie, a protective cocoon against the suffocating shadows. "Mom!" Emma's voice sliced through the air, weak, yet fighting to rise above the din. Stephanie turned toward the altar. Emma was there, still bound, but the pulsing light seemed to reach for her, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. With renewed determination, Stephanie lunged closer, reaching for her daughter. The light brightened, a dazzling beacon that pushed back the creeping shadows. She could see Emma's face, pale and straining, a glimmer of hope amidst the horror. "No, you cannot break the bonds!" One of the witches lunged at Stephanie, fingers clawing like talons, a desperate last effort to reclaim their power. The figure raised its arm. A wave of light surged forth, hitting the approaching witch and sending her crashing to the ground. Shadows hissed and writhed, retreating as if in pain. Stephanie felt a surge of strength at the sight. The witch's grip weakened, her confidence shattered in the face of this mighty force. "Now!" the being commanded. "Seize the light!" Stephanie rushed toward Emma's side, her heart hammering in her chest. With every step, the ground quaked beneath her, the ritual's remnants calling out like a chorus of lost souls. "Come on, Emma, we're getting out of here!" She reached for her daughter's fingers, feeling the warmth of life pulse against her cold skin, but the shadows roared back, lunging to reclaim their prize. The altar shook violently, spitting sparks of dark magic. "No, you won't take her!" Stephanie screamed, feeling raw energy crackle in her veins. She pulled with every fiber of her being, channeling strength she didn't know she possessed. As Emma's fingers slipped free, the ground shuddered violently, a crevasse forming beneath the altar. Time stretched, seconds contorting into a warping eternity. Shadows shrieked, their forms dissolving before her eyes. The air brimmed with electric tension, a palpable fear hanging thick like fog. "Mom!" Emma gasped, clinging to her as they tumbled back away from the altar, but then the figure froze, turning toward the disintegrating shadows. It screamed, a sound that shattered the last shreds of darkness. "You have awakened something ancient, and it will not forget." The air shook with the entity's anger, a wave of light scattering the remnants of the ritual. But suddenly, everything stilled. A silence deep enough to drown in enveloped the clearing. With hearts racing, Stephanie and Emma stood together at the edge of the chaos, watching as the shadows dissipated into nothing. The figure's glow pulsed more intensely, promising protection, yet its eyes were filled with dread. "What did we just disturb?" Stephanie whispered, fear coiling tightly in her chest as the figure turned to face them once more. "There's still more to come," it warned, voice echoing ominously. "They will return." Stephanie's heart sank. The ordeal was far from over, and as they stood at the brink of an uncertain future, horrors unseen loomed just beyond the edges of the darkened forest. What other horrors awaited them in the shadows? The figure loomed before them, radiating an unsettling glow that danced through the thick shadow lingering in the air. It was not just light, it felt alive, full of weight and expectation. As it stepped closer, the shadows slithered back, as if bowing before a greater power. "Mom, what's happening?" Emma's voice trembled, her grip on Stephanie tightening. Fear flickered in her wide eyes, seeking reassurance. We fought them off, Emma, we did." Her own voice felt thin, as if the victory was only a thin veil draped over their true circumstances. But deep down, unease gnawed at her. The figure's warning echoed in her mind like a grim drumbeat. The trees surrounding them seemed to hunch lower, branches clawing at the darkening sky. Each rustle sent the chill of dread down Stephanie's spine. "Should we run?" she whispered, glancing around as the forest loomed ominously, shadows twisting in unsettling patterns. "No," the being said, its voice deepening like thunder. "You must endure. They will come again, and our light will not hold forever." A tremor of uncertainty passed through Stephanie. Had they truly escaped, or was this a brief reprieve? The night hung thick with whispered threats, the air constricting around them. Suddenly, a howl cut through the silence, echoing from deep within the trees. It was haunting and primal, a sound unlike anything she had ever heard. A growl joined the howl, a low, growling menace that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Her veins froze. "Mom, please, we need to go," Emma urged, her voice rising with panic. But the figure shook its head, a kaleidoscope of light flickering around its form. You must face what comes. The shadows are hungry, and they will sense weakness. Before Stephanie could even process its words, more howls erupted, a cacophony of monstrous cries surrounding them. It was as if the darkness itself had taken a breath, preparing to release its fury. She caught glimpses of movement between the trees, vague, writhing shapes shifting just beyond the edge of the clearing. "Stay close," Stephanie commanded, hoisting Emma against her side. The light emitted by the figure grew brighter, pulsating as it seemed to draw from their fear, feeding it. As they stood rooted, the shadows within the trees morphed, forming chaotic silhouettes that twisted and snapped like living things. "Face me!" the figure bellowed, and an otherworldly power swept through the clearing. Stephanie felt a rush of warmth, but it was quickly swallowed by an overwhelming chill that crept from the forest's depths. Suddenly, the first of the shadows lunged, a mass of darkness with glowing eyes that burned with fury. It swooped forward like a bat out of hell, and before Stephanie could react, the figure struck out, its brilliance flaring in a brilliant arc. "Run!" it shouted, desperation lacing its voice. "Now!" Time leaped forward like a jagged knife. Stephanie seized Emma's hand, pulling her into a sprint, their feet pounding against the earth as sweat dripped down her back. The forest became a blur of trees and shadows, a labyrinth of impending doom. Behind them, the howls turned to roars of rage, anger rippling through the air. With every step, the darkness clawed at their heels, tearing apart the fleeting safety they clung to. "Don't look back!" Stephanie screamed, her heart hammering as primal terror flooded through her. But Emma dared to glance. "Mom!" The moment shattered like glass. An icy grip anchored itself around their ankles, clawed hands made of shadow seizing them, pulling them down into the abyss. "Fight!" The figure's voice reverberated in the distance as a blinding thrust of light shot from the figure, puncturing the darkness. But it was not enough. The surge was fleeting. "Mom!" Emma shrieked, her voice slicing through the chaos, and then all at once a blinding wall of light surged, enveloping them, casting everything into uncertainty. As the luminescence erupted, silence throbbed in the wake of chaos. What had they unleashed? Yet a new sound came to life, a whispering, a chant rising from the depths. "Can we escape this?" Stephanie questioned, holding her breath, wondering if the shadows were truly behind them or if something worse awaited in the dark. The answer hovered, tauntingly out of reach, just as it had always been. The light enveloping Stephanie and Emma swirled like a tempest, pushing against the dark, trying to reclaim the woods. But the whispers grew, a chorus of malignity that permeated their thoughts. It was as if the shadows had not only leaped at them, but had dug deep into their psyche, knitting fear into the very fabric of their minds. "What's happening?" Emma's voice trembled, laced with dread. I don't know," Stephanie gasped, feeling her heart pound in her chest. The brilliance twinkled like stars against the pervasive darkness, yet she felt the warmth leaving her skin, replaced with a frigid dread. The shadows hissed, writhing at the edge of the light. There were hissing voices now, murmuring threats laced with sinister promises. It was a language she did not understand, but the intent crystal clear. They would not allow them to escape. "Stay close," she urged, clutching Emma tighter. Their eyes darted around, searching for the figure that had provided them a fleeting flicker of hope. Yet it was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly the ground shook. Something massive was approaching, displacing leaves, snapping branches as it hurried toward them. The whispers transformed into screeches, a tumultuous battle cry of the darkness bending to a terrible purpose. "Run!" Stephanie shouted, instinct compelling her feet to move even before her mind formed a plan. They stumbled backward, the pulsating light flickering between them and the terror closing in. Momentum carried them forward, each stride a desperate plea for survival. The trees seemed to close in, limbs reaching out like skeletal hands, grasping for their escape. With every heartbeat, the shadows flared, morphing into figures that toyed with the edges of their perception. "Look for the path!" Emma cried, pointing ahead where a faint outline glimmered. It was rickety, a clear promise of freedom. But they had no time. A shadow loomed overhead, a gargantuan silhouette that descended with a hunger, blocking their way. Stephanie's stomach sank as she caught the glint of menacing eyes watching them, a watching predator. "Don't stop!" she yelled, urgency seeping into every crease of her words. They bounded after the sliver of light, the shrill whispers clawing at their minds. The moment they reached the path, Emma stumbled, nearly losing her footing. But then something pulled at her, a chilling proximity that pulled her back toward the growing shadows. Stephanie gripped Emma's hand tighter, her own fears coursing through, threatening to overwhelm her. "Emma, hold on!" But Emma's expression shifted abruptly, caught between devouring shadows and the rushing light. "Mom! It wants me!" A sharp crack echoed, and the air twisted thick like fog, warping all sound. The world around them flickered, reality distorted into a nightmarish haze. Shadows danced maliciously, mocking them with smiles made of dark. They churned, tearing at the shallow glimmers of hope sprinkled in their path. "Fight it!" Stephanie commanded, though the words dripped with uncertainty. A sudden gale of wind blasted toward them, carrying a cacophony of cries. With the force, the shapes lunged, a mass of confusion and terror crashing against their light. The whispers crescendoed into a wailing roar. Fear stabbed through Stephanie, sharp as a dagger. What if this was it? What if the light wavered and the shadows won? And then, without warning, silence enveloped them once more, heavy and oppressive. The air stilled, but the shadows remained. Everywhere they turned, blank eyes stared back, waiting. "Mom." Emma's voice was a mere whisper, barely audible in the thick tension. Stephanie felt the weight of dread drop in her stomach. "Emma, we need to—" But before she could finish, a silhouette stepped from the void, towering and grotesque. Darkness swallowed the last remnants of their light, cold hands reaching toward them. "What do you desire?" the figure intoned, its voice slithering like smoke in the air, smooth yet twisted. Stephanie's heart raced. She knew the answer, but could feel it fluttering out of reach. Had they lost everything? Was this their final fate in the depths of shadows? Before she could speak, the figure lunged, darkness spilling forth like ivy, choking the life from the light. "Fight!" the figure from before screamed, desperate and haunting. "Don't let the darkness take you!" As shadows raced toward them, threatening to engulf their very essence, she felt a surge, not of fear but of defiance. Would they bend or break? But even as resolve surged, part of her feared they might have awakened something far worse. Could they escape from the black that threatened to consume them, or were they destined to be forever lost in the abyss? The darkness was creeping ever closer, and every breath felt heavier as they stood on the precipice of despair. What awaited them on the other side? The darkness lunged at them, a mass of swirling despair, tendrils reaching with insatiable hunger. Black fingers grazed Emma's ankle, and a frigid jolt shot through her body, a chilling reminder of their imminent doom. "Stephanie!" she cried out, her voice a piercing echo in the void, almost swallowed by the heavy silence. "Hang on!" Stephanie screeched, pulling Emma fiercely as she felt the icy grip tighten. They turned, stumbling back down the path they had just fought to reach, but the shadows now engulfed it. Panic clawed at their throats, making the air feel thick and unbreathable, a vice wrapping tighter with every passing second. But then, there, a flicker of the old figure, the glimmer of dark wings, a warped memory of hope. "Follow me!" it shouted, half-formed and flickering in and out of reality. "Where?" Emma gasped, her legs trembling. "Trust me." It was all the encouragement they could afford as they tore down the shadowy menagerie. As they fled, the whispers began again, snaking their way back into their minds. "Give in. It's better that way." They were relentless, every syllable a bee sting in Stephanie's skull. the promises of release from a life lived in fear. But she shook her head, defiance burning in her chest. "Keep running! Keep your head clear!" she shouted back at Emma, whose face was rapidly losing color. Branches snapped underfoot, and a blink later they were plunged into a stifling darkness that felt alive, shifting and alive. Was it imagination, or was something truly slithering behind them now? A primal instinct drove them to push harder, faster. They had to escape, and yet they felt the ground tremble beneath them, signaling something immensely powerful was awakening. The shadows behind them coalesced, forming a daunting figure, towering, monstrous, with glowing eyes that pulsed as if beating. The whispers rose to violent roars, a cacophony that threatened to drown out entire worlds. "You cannot escape," it echoed, too many voices echoing from too many mouths, chained together in a deeply unsettling melody. "Faster!" Stephanie roared, adrenaline coursing through her as she pulled Emma along, each footfall heavy with dread. But in the depths of her thoughts, a crushing truth settled in. Would they be able to outrun what they had awakened? Renegade branches clawed at their flesh, trying to swing them back into the maw of darkness that now seemed to stretch forever. The fleeting light was fading, on the cusp of extinguishing, and with it their slender chances of survival. Then a shimmering blip broke through the consuming dark. An opening, an escape. "There!" Emma cried, eyes wide with frantic clarity as they spotted the outline of a clearing splattered with pale moonlight. They tore toward the glimmer, desperation igniting their veins. But as they neared it, the sinister force behind them surged, crashing toward them with the weight of 1,000 burdens. They could almost feel it on their backs, the breath of the darkness warm and putrid against their skin. "Don't look back!" Stephanie yelled, stomping forward as if she could outpace the very shadows clawing for them. But that insatiable phantom grasped at their clothing, unraveling the fibers like thread pulled too hard. Emma screamed as she felt something cold latch onto her wrist, freezing her in place. The energy in the air shifted. Desperation turned into raw panic. "No!" Stephanie screamed, reaching, willing her body to stretch just a bit more, but the space between them had become an abyss. Just as Emma stumbled, about to be snatched back, branches erupted around them, blurring the lines of reality. "I won't lose you!" Stephanie yelled, launching forward. She grasped Emma's other hand and yanked her forward with every ounce of strength. The darkness screamed a guttural shriek that seemed to resonate in their very bones. Then, in a blink, the shadows faltered, coiling back, retreating like a tide. With a shattering motion, they broke through the veil, landing in the moonlit clearing. Gasping for breath, they hit the ground hard, disheveled and soaked in fear. The figure stood at the edge of the shadows, seething and rumbling, its form shifting uneasily. "You think you have won," it hissed, a promise of chaos that would follow them. "The darkness will come for you again. It never tires." As they caught their breath, uncertainty loomed. Had they escaped, or had they merely awakened something even more malevolent? The chilling realization settled in Stephanie's chest. The night was far from over. "Did we get away? Did we really—" Emma stammered, her voice laced with disbelief, but the echo of those heartless whispers still lingered, ebbing on the edges of the forest. And just like that, a rustle emerged, sending shivers down their spines, the atmosphere thick with foreboding. Something else was in the woods, something that hungered for more than just shadows. As they tried to collect themselves, the darkness shivered with anticipation. What new horror awaited them in the heart of the woods, waiting to watch them suffer? The moonlit clearing felt surreal, like a grotesque stage set for a macabre play. Emma and Stephanie lay gasping, the weight of the darkness still hanging like a pall over them. The air was thick with the bitter scent of decay, mingling with the earthy aroma of wet soil. Every breath was a reminder that they had barely skirted death, and yet the silence felt more dangerous than the screams they had escaped. "Did you see that?" Stephanie whispered, scanning the edge of the shadows. The figure still lingered, its form blotting out the stars, pulsating with a menacing energy. Emma's voice trembled. "We need to run. Now." The flickering light had given them the illusion of safety, but their instinct screamed otherwise. No sooner had they risen than they heard it, a rustling from behind them, snaking through the underbrush. The whispers returned, rising like an ancient chant, a sinister song that clawed at their minds. "Come back. Come back." "What's happening?" Emma gasped as the ground beneath them rumbled ominously. Stephanie's heart raced, the primal fear gripping her throat. "We can't stay here." She grabbed Emma's wrist, pulling her toward the thicket that bordered the clearing, where shadows danced in mocking glee. As they stumbled deeper into the woods, the darkness seemed to shift around them, a living entity aware of their every move. The trees twisted, their branches similar to skeletal hands reaching out, clawing at them. The whispers turned into a chanting chorus, weaving tales of despair and torment. Trust the darkness. Embrace it. Their desperate flight was drowned by the cacophony of secrets, past nightmares flaring into life around them. Stephanie gritted her teeth, her resolve crumbling with every word. "Fight it! Don't listen!" But Emma shook her head, the whispers weaving a sinister web in her mind. What if they're right? She hesitated, caught in the pull of something deeper. Shadows twisted around her feet, seeming to allure her deeper into the dark embrace. "No!" Stephanie yelled, panic surging through her again. "We need to stay together!" Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed. A branch, rather large and twisted, came crashing down mere inches from Emma, jolting her back to reality. With urgency, Stephanie pulled her forward, the tension between them thick. "Look!" Emma pointed toward a faint glimmer ahead. It flickered like a will-o'-the-wisp, taunting them, promising light. But could they trust it? As they ran, the ground uneven and treacherous, something stirred in the darkness behind them. Larger waves crashed against their senses, a brush of air that felt almost warm, followed by a chilling presence that made their hair stand on end. "Faster!" Stephanie urged, adrenaline pumping through her veins as panic clutched at her heart. Just as they sprinted for the light, a guttural snarl sliced through the night, freezing them in their tracks. Emerging from the foliage was a creature, inhuman in form, shadowy yet solid, with eyes that burned like smoldering coals. Its maw twisted into a snarl, showing rows of gleaming teeth that seemed to illuminate the darkness around it. "You think you can escape?" The weight of dread bore down upon them, every instinct screaming that they needed to flee, but their legs felt like lead. Something primal in Stephanie roared. She gripped Emma's hand tighter. "We won't let it take us. We won't become part of its darkness." They surged forward again, hearts racing, the creature's snarl echoing behind them, a reminder of the terror that chased them. What was this monster? When they burst into the light, breathless, it hit them. The truth lingered in the air, potent and electric. This clearing was not a refuge, but a trap, ensnaring them in a net of malevolent intentions. The flickering light dimmed, the forest pulsing with sinister energy, and the whispers grew closer, more familiar. What had once been a flimsy hope now felt like a cruel joke. Suddenly the light extinguished. They were plunged into darkness once more, the monster's breath hot and rancid against their necks. "Run!" Stephanie screamed. But as they dashed, a chilling thought pierced through Stephanie's mind. Had they truly escaped, or merely awakened something that would haunt them forever? A chilling rustle echoed. Another entity, hungry and waiting just behind the veil. Could they withstand what was lurking, or would they too fall into its eternal grip? The howl of the wind swept through the trees, echoing their uncertainty. As they ran, the darkness promised them one last conversation, one that would seal their fate. They raced through the trees, breathless and trembling, the shadows closing in like a tide on the verge of swallowing them. Every footfall echoed with the whispers that clamoured in their minds, twisting past, clawing for their fear, urging them into a state of surrender. But this was not just a fight for their lives, it was a battle for their very souls. "Keep going! Don't look back!" Stephanie shouted, adrenaline surging through her limbs as they ducked and dodged, branches slashing at them like wicked claws. Behind them, the monstrous growl echoed, heavy and guttural, the promise of pursuit like a ravenous beast hunting its prey. But Emma lagged, confusion seeping in. "Mom, what if we can't escape? What if it just wants to take me?" "No!" Stephanie's heart twisted, panic gripping her insides. "Don't you dare think like that. We break free, together, or not at all." The words surged with desperation, mingling a fierce hope with the encroaching darkness. Suddenly there came a blinding flash, a crack in the air like thunder, and for a fleeting moment they could see the shadows retreat just as a storm might clear the horizon. "This way," a voice called, somehow familiar. The figure appeared again, flickering in and out of reality, urging them toward a flickering light just ahead. "Follow me," it beckoned, and with it came strength. The shadows hesitated, fear nestled in their whispers now. Maybe they were not alone in this fight. They pushed forward, shoving through the underbrush toward the flicker, the silhouette growing nearer. "Stay with me," Stephanie urged, gripping her daughter's hand tighter, the connection between them a lifeline against the dark tide. With each step, the palpable presence of fear slowly lightened, as if hope itself ignited the path beneath their rushing feet. And then they burst through the trees into an opening washed in moonlight, breath flooding their lungs with relief. "There," Emma pointed, her voice a fragile spark in the encroaching darkness. Before them lay an ancient stone circle, glimmering shards scattered like pearls across its surface. This is magic," the figure said, its presence swelling like the rising tide, but less defined now, more solid. "You have to summon it. Call its light to you." "Mom, what do we do?" Emma spat out, her body trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. "Just believe," Stephanie yelled, the words ripping from her throat. Without hesitation, she stepped into the circle, feeling a warmth pulse beneath her feet, resonating with the power of the earth beneath the stars. "Emma, join me," she beckoned, and her daughter darted to her side, apprehension mixing with the exhilaration of purpose. They stood there, hearts racing, fingers intertwined. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3! Together they shouted, "We command the light!" Their voices bellowed into the night, summoning the resonance simmering in the air. A dazzling pulse erupted, rippling outward from them. The ground trembled, and the shadows recoiled, twisting away from the radiant light that spilled forth. It surged, golden and silver beams spun with shades of azure, illuminating the darkness that had tried to claim them. The shadows shrieked angrily, a cacophony of voices rising into a desperate storm. "You cannot hold us! This is not your place!" But the light flickered, battling back against despair, gaining strength with every moment. Emboldened, Stephanie squeezed Emma's hand tighter. "Keep it going. Don't let them break through." The shadows lunged but recoiled, tangled in the radiant web they were weaving. The light blazed, pushing harder against the creeping darkness, each wave crashing like a furious tide, turning the world upside down. Suddenly, an ominous roar erupted as the monstrous figure from before broke into the light, pushing through like an iron hand through gauze. Its eyes blazed, glowing embers of hatred and deep-seated fury. "Give in! You can't fight what you are!" "No!" they shouted as one, the defiance echoing back through the air, the power of their resolve solidifying under the weight of despair. The figure surged forth, tendrils of darkness reaching out to strangle their light. Yet in that moment, something clicked. Every moment of love, every laugh shared, every tender memory glowed within the very essence of their being. That was their power. That was their light. With one last roar of defiance, they thrust their arms up. We are stronger than you. We choose to fight back." The light exploded as if igniting fireworks on a night meant for hope against fear. The force surged outward, and shadows recoiled violently, howling in defeat, consumed by their own darkness. The monstrous figure twisted, contorted, and then disintegrated beneath the brilliance, a swirling hurricane of shadows collapsing upon itself until there was nothing left but silence. In their place, warmth enveloped the clearing, a serene peace spilling out like warm honey. Stephanie and Emma gasped, their bodies trembling, yet filled with an unfamiliar calm as they looked at the fading light. I think we did it," Emma said breathlessly. "Together," Stephanie replied, taking a moment to ground herself in the softness of the new dawn. The shadows that had once threatened to consume them faded into the whispers of the past, seemingly gone, but still echoing softly in the wind. But Emma turned, a somber look crossing her face. "Will they return?" Stephanie's heart sank at the thought. Perhaps. It's Halloween after all. But as they stood in that enchanted clearing, light breaking through the horizon, hope filled her chest. They would face whatever came next, whatever horrors lurked in the shadows, together. "Let's go home," she said, and they walked into the light. But as they stepped towards the path, the whispers rustled gently through the trees, a reminder of tales untold and mysteries that may never truly rest. A chill ran down Stephanie's spine, but she held her daughter's hand tighter, the bond stronger than any darkness. The night, it seemed, was far from over. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support.